Valiant Comics Bloodshot #3 hit store shelves and spinner racks in April of 1993. The same month, Indecent Proposal was the #1 film, and everyone was jamming to Informer by Snow. Bloodshot is searching for answers about his past in the Flatbush regions of Brooklyn. After saving a young gang member from a beating, Bloodshot is attacked by mob boss Don Carboni's men. After easily eliminating the thugs in a firefight, Bloodshot vows to find Carboni and take care of him once and for all. This issue was written by Bloodshot creator Kevin VanHook, who was also writing the Flash Gordon comic strip that same year. VanHook is also a noted visual effects supervisor and filmmaker. Speaking exclusively to Read the Freaking Comics, VanHook discusses this issue in detail. Bloodshot 3 was an example of me continuing the exploration of Bloodshot's real identity. When we launched that title, he knew almost nothing. Soon we revealed that he was tied to organized crime. This is part of that slow burn reveal. Meanwhile, Bloodshot has come up with a new name, referring to himself as Mike. This would lead to the identity of Michael Lazarus. His real identity was Angelo Mortale, loosely Angel of Death, and now he would become Michael Lazarus, back from the dead. While writing this issue, I didn't know exactly how it was going to play out. I know we wanted to have Mortale sold out by Carboni, and his memories have been wiped. I always liked the idea of nurture versus nature. Out of the life of crime and with a clean slate, Michael Lazarus is now a good man. He wasn't before. A tidbit that you may know is that the mob boss who set up Mortale, the guy named Carboni, penciler Don Perlin based his appearance on himself. This issue also introduces the idea of the Weaponeers, a group of white-suited arms dealers linked to Colin King, Ninjak, who we would introduce a few issues later. Speaking of Don Perlin, you may know him best from Marvel's Werewolf by Night and Moon Knight, a character he co-created, The Defenders and Ghost Rider. He joined Valiant Comics as artist and editor in 1991, penciling the series Solar, Man of the Atom, and Bloodshot. As editor, he worked on Solar, Man of the Atom, Shadow Man, and Magnus, Robot Fighter. Perlin went into semi-retirement in 1995. In 2012, Perlin penciled a new Bloodshot story, The Tablet, for the Bloodshot Blood of the Machine hardcover, written by Kevin VanHook and inked by Bob Wiacek, his original collaborators on the series. Perlin died only a few months ago in May at the age of 94. Inker Chris Ivey began his career in 1988 working on Marvel's New Universe imprint, Cyforce. He then began working in the mainstream line of Marvel on characters such as X-Men, Spider-Man, and Ghost Rider. He later moved on to DC and worked on titles like Superman, Green Lantern, and The Flash. Jade Moede is an American comic book letterer and colorist, recognized for his significant contributions to the industry since the mid-1980s. Moede became a regular at Valiant Comics, serving as the main letterer on several series. His lettering work includes such titles as Eternal Warrior and Solar, Man of the Atom. In addition to lettering, Moede occasionally took on coloring duties, contributing to various Valiant titles. George Roberts Jr. is a seasoned comic book letterer, renowned for his extensive work with Valiant Comics during the 1990s. His precise lettering has enhanced numerous series, including Archer and Armstrong, Bloodshot, Eternal Warrior, Harbinger, Shadow Man, and Solar, Man of the Atom. His work is featured in notable crossover events like Deathmate Orange and Deathmate Pink, showcasing his versatility across various titles. Bob Layton was one of the chief architects of the Valiant universe, along with Jim Shooter, Barry Windsor-Smith, Stephen J. Mastersky, and John Hartz. He co-created a number of core characters, including Exo Manowar, and later became editor-in-chief and senior vice president. He was editing a vast array of titles during the early 1990s, for which he won Editor of the Year award in 1993, as voted by the readers of the comics magazine Wizard. Speaking exclusively to Read the Freaking Comics, Layton spoke about Bloodshot. The idea of Bloodshot came to me back in my Marvel days. I had read an article in Scientific American about nanites, back when they were purely theoretical. And I said, well, that's that. Better than being bitten by a radioactive spider. That kind of makes more sense. So that was part of the genesis of the character. In the capable hands of my chosen writer, Kevin VanHook, he took the concept and successfully ran with it. Did you know that the football match that can be seen on the TV screen in the first panel can only be the NFC Championship Game from January 17, 1993, between the San Francisco 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys, which the Dallas Cowboys won 20-30. The two teams had not met since the 49ers waived defensive back Ronnie Lott, who is mentioned in this panel. Carboni offers the Weaponeer a Havana cigar, which was illegal to own in 1993. Back in 1962, United States President John F. Kennedy imposed a trade embargo on Cuba to sanction Fidel Castro's communist government. Of course, not before getting his hands on 1,200 of them just the day before. Since the advent of the internet, it has been much easier for people in the US to purchase cigars online from other countries, and in 2015, rules were loosened and allowed for the importation of up to $100 worth of alcohol or tobacco per traveler from Cuba. This was increased to $800 a year later. However, this rule was changed by the next administration. U.S. citizens may legally consume Cuban cigars while in Cuba or while in another country in which they are legal, but may not bring back any of them through U.S. customs. The car in this panel used by the mob thugs is very similar to a 1993 Cadillac Sedan DeVille Spring Edition Roadster. However, one of the most famous of the mobster cars is the Lincoln Continental. Whatever the classic decade, the Lincoln Continental conveyed wealth and style while having a menacing look about it. Looking into the 1990s in New York City specifically, it looks like the mob liked their Mercedes cars as well. Famous Mafia Don John Gotti showed impeccable taste in cars, owning a 1972 Jaguar E-Type convertible with V12 power. These days, the Cadillac Escalade is a statement car that exudes power and money. It is a good choice for gangsters who don't want to keep a low profile. The New York City Mafia in 1993 was on the decline. The RICO laws created by the American government in the 1970s was still impacting the Mafia, as many former gangsters were becoming informants. John Gotti, the reputed head of the five families at that time, was serving a life sentence, and the organization as a whole was a pale spectacle of what it was just 30 years prior. This issue came my way via a lot sale I found online. I was happy to pick it up, as Valiant is not a common publisher I used to buy from. I felt slightly frustrated by this issue, however. I'm frustrated because I see the storyline in front of me and understand where they are heading, but this issue feels like all filler and no substance. There are too many and then moments. An and then moment is when events occur, but they are not impacted by the events prior or after. Hero visits bar he may remember, then walks home. Mob boss meets with an arms dealer. Hero stops an alleyway beating. Hero is attacked by mobsters. I know this storyline is picking up, but reading this issue out of context tells me nothing. I don't perceive any value or entertainment out of it as an individual issue. I can understand VanHook's slow burn approach here, but I still wish there was more meat on the bones for this one issue alone. Bloodshot is an interesting character, and I know there are some great storylines in his original run. I just wanted more out of this one issue. PriceCharting.com had this issue as high as $52 in 2023. It has gone down in value to under $13 for a mint condition issue. MyComicShop.com is selling a slab for $33, and eBay has one copy for about $6. Back in 1988, former editor-in-chief for Marvel Comics Jim Shooter, Stephen J. Masursky, and a group of investors attempted to purchase Marvel Entertainment. After that venture fell through, Shooter and Masursky instead formed Voyager Communications in 1989, establishing Valiant Comics as an imprint of Voyager. Numerous writers and artists from Marvel, including Barry Windsor-Smith and Bob Layton, were recruited, and they immediately got to work on an interconnected line of superhero comics featuring a mixture of characters licensed from Western Publishing and original creations. Mangus Robot Fighter was the first title released in 1991, followed by Solar, Man of the Atom. Both titles were licensed from Gold Key Comics. Rye became the third title published by Valiant. The publisher began to see success with Harbinger #1, listed on the top 10 list of Wizard magazine for a record 8 consecutive months, and was eventually named Collectible of the Decade, while Rye #0 appeared on Wizard's top 10 list for a new record 9 consecutive months. In 1992, Valiant won the Best Publisher under 5% market share from comic distributor Diamond. The next year, Valiant won Best Publisher over 5% market share, becoming the first publisher outside of Marvel and DC to do so. Bloodshot is one of the best-selling Valiant characters, with total sales in all languages approaching 7 million comics. The character made 2 introductory appearances in popular titles Rye and Eternal Warrior. He garnered enough interest to get his own self-titled series in February of 1993. It was a much-anticipated comic that became the best-selling issue and has gone on to sell approximately 1 million copies. According to Diamond Comic Distributors, Valiant Comic had 7.85 of all comic sale revenue in 1993, which totaled between $800 and $850 million. Superman dominated that year, with the top 5 selling titles for the entire year. They were Action Comics 687, Adventures of Superman 500 and 501, Superman 78, and Superman Man of Steel 22. Bloodshot issue 3 did not crack the top 300, but issues 5 through 8 did, coming in as high as the 185th top-selling comic for the year. The top-selling Valiant comics were Turok, Dinosaur Hunter #1, Deathmate Prologue, Magnus Robot Fighter number 25, Exo Manowar and Rai and the Future Force number 9, all between the 6th and 46th top-selling comics of the year. The industry as a whole reached its peak around this time in 1993. Thousands of comic shops ordered millions of comic books a month, but many of these books were for the speculator market and not the average consumer. About a dozen or so different distributors were offering comic shops easy credit terms to purchase, meaning almost 2 times as many accounts were ordering comics than there were actual comic shops selling them. The system started to collapse in on itself as many of the comics ordered were never paid for, as failing retailers began leaving the scene just as fast as they entered it. The bubble had popped, and it would be 1994 before the downturn would become painfully obvious. The crash of the 1990s was underway. The ads in this issue were a mix of video games, books, and magazines. Nintendo and Capcom had 2 ads, one for Star Wars on Game Boy, and the other was for Mega Man 5 on the NES. Palladium Books was promoting their RPG products, and Wizard Comics was running a truly bizarre advertising campaign featuring cows. Sega, meanwhile, was promoting Sewer Shark for their Sega CD expansion unit. Sewer Shark is a first-person rail shooter video game. Think of a rail shooter game as if you, the viewer, are traveling on rails similar to a roller coaster, with limited range of movement, shooting bad guys as they appear on screen. This game was the first on a home video console to use full-motion video for its primary gameplay. Sewer Shark is one of the first titles for the Sega CD. Sewer Shark was one of Sega CD's best-selling games, with more than 100,000 units sold before having been bundled with the system. Another 500,000 copies were bundled with the Sega CD. In the end, the game sold more than 750,000 copies. The game is on the Associated Press list of top 10 video games for 1993. They called it bizarre and wildly entertaining, and a must-have game for all Sega CD owners. Valiant was promoting 5 of their own titles and crossovers: Rai and the Future Force, Solar, Man of the Atom, The Hardcore, The Book of Geomancer, and Secret Weapons. This week I wanted to find a comic shop in Flatbush to honor Bloodshot's stomping grounds. I found Bulletproof Comics, Inc., located at 2178 Nostrand Avenue in Brooklyn, or you can find them at bulletproofcomics.com. Thanks for checking out this video. If you want to see more, please hit like and subscribe. If you have suggestions for comics you want me to deep dive into, please leave a comment below. Please help and support real artists. AI is great for a lot of things, but not for creating art and replacing artists. Thank you.